And Loyola Law professor Jessica Levinson joins us now so we can talk a little bit more about these raids that are planned for tomorrow. What do you think President Trump's play is on these ICE raids?
I think he's making good on what was really the centerpiece of his campaign, which is to be tough on legal and illegal immigration. And I think that this is part of that. I think he's saying, I haven't forgotten about this. And if you look at his 2020 campaign strategy, I think he's really doubling down on that. And I think that much of his campaign strategy will be just this, looking at the core of what his message has been and trying to strengthen that message, not necessarily trying to reach out to the swing voters in the swing states.
But sticking with those who voted for him last time. Okay, so the president did decide not to launch a plan for an air raid to retaliate for Iran's downing of the unmanned U.S. drone. The president, we understand, spoke with Republican leaders about an appropriate response. And what do you think they really told him?
I think they told him, please be circumspect. Do not do this right away. I think what they told him is that this is a potential tinderbox situation and that it is deadly serious to launch a raid against Iran. And are we ready for this? And are we ready for all of the consequences that could come with a war with Iran? I think that they really asked him to basically take a deep breath and think about what could happen. And I think it shows that there is actually, I think, bipartisan support to really try and tread very carefully on this issue. And the fact that we were essentially 10 minutes away from launching an attack, I think should give everyone pause.
Yeah, because you don't believe that it was just because of the 150 people that he felt would be killed in the attack.
Well, I think it was the 150 people. I think it was the feedback he was getting in general as to what would happen as a result of this, and the fact that he apparently didn't know the casualties until 10 minutes before saying go ahead is something that I think will give Republicans and Democrats pause, because these types of situations will happen again for the next year and a half, and if there's 2 terms, for the next 6.5 years.
And it looks as though the president's use of executive privilege will end up in the courts. Have the courts weighed in on privilege in the past?
They have. They absolutely have weighed in on executive privilege. It's not something that's actually in the text of the Constitution. It is something that the Supreme Court recognizes. I think what's important for viewers to know is that this is not a normal assertion of executive privilege. Usually it's much smaller, it's much narrower. We think of it in terms of issues that raise national security concerns, specific privacy concerns, specific issues of private deliberations in the White House with the president. These assertions of executive privilege, I think, are being used much more as a sword as opposed to a shield. Essentially, I think it's a political decision to try and run out the clock on these inquiries until after the 2020 election, even if at that point a court says that's too broad of an assertion of executive privilege, it's still a political win.
Tell me, what do you think is the one story that really didn't make the headlines this week that we should have really taken notice of?
So I'm a law professor, so of course I'm going to say it's a legal decision. This is Supreme Court season. We have 1 more week left in the Supreme Court. Last week, the court came out with a decision where they said that a 40-foot peace cross could stand on government ground in Maryland. The question was, the First Amendment says under the Establishment Clause, basically, church and state separate. But the court said with a 7-2 majority, it's okay for this cross to stand because it's a war memorial and it's taken on secular purpose. Now, there's 9 justices on the Supreme Court, 7 different opinions in this case. Look to see this issue of how close church and state can get as a huge issue in the next 5-10 years going forward on all of the courts.
Interesting. You know, being from San Diego, we've had a situation out there with a large cross as well. So interesting to see what's happening. All right.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
We certainly appreciate all of your insight.